whole of Athens stretches out before you. This was a famous view described by many early travelers. In 1801, Edward Clarke wrote, "There is no spot whence Athens may be seen to compare with this. All that nature and art can possibly exhibit by every marvelous combination of vast and splendid objects and of surprising effects of color, light, and shade."
This is sweet corn. In a few days, it'll be harvested. 5 months of sun and rain and summer will be rewarded. The year will have come full circle during those bonanza months of autumn. The ancient Greeks explained this cycle of the seasons, sowing and harvest, death and rebirth, with the myth of Demeter, goddess of agriculture. Now, Demeter's daughter, Persephone, was kidnapped by the god of the underworld, Hades. Hades and Demeter thereupon struck a bargain in which Persephone would spend half the year on earth with her mother and the other half in the underworld with Hades. The 6 months spent on earth meant spring and summer, while the 6 months in the underworld brought autumn and winter. To pay homage to Demeter in her time of sorrow, the autumn, the Greeks made a 14-mile pilgrimage from the Parthenon in Athens to the temple of Demeter at Eleusis to partake in the Eleusinian mysteries. And to this day, the rites of this celebration remain a secret. Our old friend, historian Michael Wood, set out to rediscover those mysterious 14 miles linking two of Greece's most fabled monuments. This is Michael Wood's Unlocking of a Mystery, a 2,500-year-old journey along the sacred way on Travels.
Travels is made possible by a grant from Lexus. At Lexus, we believe those who seek the road less traveled should be relentless in their pursuit. Travels is also made possible by the financial support of viewers like you.
This is a mystery story. The story takes place in Greece, but it begins here in England, in the university town of Cambridge. This is the story of a journey which has fascinated me for over 20 years. The Sacred Way, from Athens to Eleusis. But it begins with a man who went on that same journey 200 years ago, a professor of this university, Edward Clarke.
Like many of his contemporaries, Clarke traveled to Greece to plunder the remains of the classical past and bring them back to fill our museums.
In November 1801, Clarke was in the little village of Eleusis, or in the old pronunciation Eleusis, near Athens. And there he got caught up in an extraordinary series of events surrounding an ancient marble statue of a woman.
Elefsis stood on the ruins of the holiest temple of the ancient Greeks to the Earth Mother Demeter and her daughter Persephone, who was seized by Pluto, king of the underworld, in the famous myth. The statue, which had a lost twin, had stood inside the sanctuary where the ceremonies took place, which the Greeks called mysteries, literally secret initiations, the origin of today's word mystery.
To his surprise, Clark saw that the statue was still venerated by the villagers, who lit candles and hung flowers around her face. The women in particular prayed to her to make their fields fertile. They called her their darling, Saint Demeter. Clark shipped the statue back to England, despite their protests and strange omens. When he left, a curse was pronounced. First, that the ship which took her away would sink, which it did. Second, that if she left them, the fields of Elefsis would cease to bear fruit.
It was Clark's tale which led me to Greece. To walk the 14 miles of the sacred way from Athens to Elefsis in a single day in search of the secret of the ancient mysteries. Had something of their spirit survived, which Clark had touched as late as 1801? The answer, if there is one at all, lies surely not in the Greek past, but in her living present.
Taxi! When I first came here in the 60s, the mass industry and tourism, which have changed the face of Greece forever, were only just beginning.
Your first time here?
No, I've been quite a few times over the years to Greece. I love it very much.
I'm happy to meet you.
It's a wonderful country. Yeah, what's your name?
My name Cosmos. Cosmos all over the world.
All over the world, Cosmos. Yeah. So, Cosmos, is Athens very different from when you were a boy?
Today, everything is chance. It's chance because it's open business. It's like the European countries.
Yeah.
Today, everything is chance. The Athens before the 1965 was with 1 million people. Today, the Athens, is 4 million people something,
It's the same old story. In a few decades, Greece has become a modern urban society. But does that change the character of the people? Before I set off on the Sacred Way, I want to visit the director of the British School of Archaeology here in Athens for some advice. Lisa French is an old friend of mine, an eminent scholar who's helped me before with clues on journeys like this.
I suppose the fact is really that now there's not much likelihood of ever finding out exactly what went on there.
No, the trouble with the Eleusinian mysteries is that they are a mystery. They always have been, and I think they always will be. We have certain ideas because we know certain of the words that govern the parts of the ceremonies. Those were known. Part seems to be some sort of dramatic production of the myth. There was a display of the holy objects.
Do we know what they were?
No. So this is lovely archaeological speculation, as always. I mean, it's a wonderful subject for archaeologists to get going on.
Why? Do you mean archaeologists always
they love
like to let their imaginations run or something?
Well, as you know, anything that you can't explain, you call a religious object. And if you don't know what the religious objects were, that gives you a lot of scope. One thing that you will need to go and look at is the relief in the National Museum here in Athens. This relief shows Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, on the left, and on the right, her daughter, Corrie, or Persephone, and between them, the boy Triptolemus. Demeter is holding probably a staff in her left hand. In her right hand, Demeter is thought to have been holding an ear of corn in gold, which she's handing to Triptolemus, who will then take it to the world. She is restoring fertility to the world by sending the boy forth with the gift of corn. What Persephone is holding in her left hand is thought to be a torch which would have lighted the procession from Athens during the night stretches. The expressions are very calm and staid, fairly typical of this period of Greek sculpture, but also, I think, showing the solemnity and the way in which the people viewed these ceremonies at Eleusis. I think the one thing that you must have with you is the ancient guidebook by Pausanias. Here it is. It's an English text for you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So, does that mean one can still go down the sacred way and use this?
Well, not quite, but you can do quite well by it. He is a 2nd century AD. He's a Roman tourist. The Romans were great tourists in Greece. It was a great tourist center for them, and so he wrote a guidebook. The thing about Eleusis is Pausanias, like everybody else, never let on to the actual secrets of the mysteries.
So he was an initiate?
Oh, he's an initiate, somebody who had been taken through the ceremonies and let into the inner rites of the cult. But his account of the sacred way is one of the best that we've got.
Easter's coming soon, and Athens is beginning to swelter under its blanket of pollution. Meanwhile, work on its most famous monument, perhaps the best-known building in the world, goes on apace. The Parthenon, symbol of Greece past and present, is being restored. Every stone is on computer. Every stone is sacred. Around Easter, the tourist season begins in earnest. People from all over the world flood in, seeking to put themselves in touch with that mythic country, ancient Greece.
Non muove per favore, non muove la... Bene, ecco, fermi. Grazie. The same way we are going up, the same way you'll go down to the bus. You don't go right, you don't go straight, you go down left. And on your way down, if you need yourself a refreshment, you'll get it at the canteen. And if you need something else very important, you'll find it around here and around the corner.
It's called the post office. Oui, les parois ont une inclination légère, mais inclination vers l'intérieur. Tous les temples, c'est-à-dire tous les 4 colonnades, ont une inclination vers l'intérieur. C'est-à-dire, le Parthénon, par conséquent.
Look at the corner column. Do you see how it is leaning in diagonally? Do you see that?
How easy it is to turn monuments into symbols of nation, race, identity. But the past as a real presence, that's a different matter. For this lies not in mute stones, in ruins, or in museums, but in people's lives, sometimes lived over hundreds of generations.
And according to the legend, this is the only tree of Athena.
Just below the Acropolis rock is a place which goes unnoticed and unvisited by all the tourists crowding above. 2 or 3 times a week, Dimitra Panagiotopoulou comes here to light the candles and sweep the floor inside a small cave. It's a Christian shrine, a healing spring dedicated to the virgin goddess of the rock. Athena, Mary, perhaps it scarcely matters. What matters is that people have come here for thousands of years to drink the water and to pray. The last keeper of the cave was an old woman called Maria. I saw her here when I was a student 20 years ago. When she was too old to carry on, she made Dimitra swear that she would take it over and pass the duty on in her turn before she died. Dimitra swore that she would. And Dimitra says that sometimes Maria comes back in her dreams to remind her of her promise. Below the Acropolis is the ancient open-air market of Athens, the Agora. And this is where the annual pilgrimage to Elefsis started. Every year, about the 27th of September, thousands gathered here to begin the procession. Anyone could be initiated, men, women, children, slaves, foreigners, as long as they'd been confirmed in the spring. The only condition was that you had to speak Greek, and you mustn't be guilty of murder. And they set off, walking down these same stones. It was only 14 miles, an easy day's journey on foot. But for the Greeks, it was the great experience that you carried with you all your life. You'll still find the open-air market of Athens next to the Agora today. It's the last one, holding out against the supermarkets and the shopping malls. And what bric-a-brac you can pick up here. Iron crosses from the German army, medals from the Greek War of Independence, old pictures of mum and dad which once hung proudly in every traditional cafe. Further on, the market's taken over by the boys. This is the weekly car sale. Pausanias passed through crowds just like this when he was writing his guidebook. You can buy anything here, was their proud boast. Chariots, donkeys, policemen, witnesses. But Pausanias liked the Athenians. They might be quarrelsome, impossible at times, but as he says, love of the human race is enshrined in their institutions. And in any case, they have more gods than anyone else. And obviously, the more gods you have, the happier you are. Just over the wall, you can see the first stretch of the ancient sacred way, which began at the city gate in the Potter's Quarter, the Keramikos. It's now in a triangle of green, spared in all the building booms. German archaeologist Ursula Knigger has dug here all her working life.
How has it been kept like this here?
Oh, we try very much to keep it like that. Clean, not only clean, but not to put any poison, how do you call them?
Yes.
To put any...
Weed killer or anything,
weed
something
killer
like
or
that,
something,
yeah.
because we have many animals here. We have many turtles, we have fish in the river, and very rare, seldom birds. Yesterday still I saw a bird over here, fishing,
really?
staying in the river, fishing these small fish, which like this you see here in the water.
It's like a little garden almost,
yeah,
isn't
it's a
it?
little garden. I think it's really a park inside of Athens, in this terrible area of these houses and dirt and traffic and all these things.
It's lovely.
You walk out past Athens' first industrial estate, now being turned into a heritage theme park. And then, there before you, still bearing its ancient name, Iera Odos, the sacred way. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? You imagine a cobbled road winding through pine glades, dotted with marble monuments, the scent of thyme wafted on a hot wind. Well, it's not like that, I'm afraid. Nevertheless, I shall follow the advice of the American novelist Henry Miller, who also walked it in a day back in 1939. You shouldn't race along the sacred way in a motor car, he said. That would be sacrilege. You should walk. Walk as they did of old, and allow your whole being to be flooded with light. For here, everything speaks now as it did then, of blinding, joyous illumination. You walk on past the remnants of an old neighborhood, ochre-walled houses with terracotta-tiled roofs, a boarded-up cafe. After the disastrous war with Turkey in 1922, many Greek refugees from Asia Minor settled here, and these streets still bear the names of their former homeland. But they're all going now, names and memories with them. Not very promising, is it? But don't be deceived. There's more to this journey than meets the eye. Until the First War, this whole area outside the city used to be a great olive grove with tens of thousands of trees, where Athenians came out for picnics at weekends. And here the street map marks a very unlikely sounding monument. And here it is. Ilia Platonos, the olive tree of Plato. Did the great philosopher really sit here in the shade and mull over the foundations of Western thought? Who can say? But Plato too was haunted by the mysteries, by the vision which, as he says, brought supreme happiness, a glimpse of the ideal beauty we've lost. As for his tree, well, a few years back there was a huge gnarled olive here, quite possibly 2,000 years old. But one night, the bus to Athens ran it down. It's in a museum now, but its roots have sprung again. The Greeks say olive trees never die. According to the guidebook of Pausanias, the first main landmark for the pilgrims was a sacred fig tree given to mankind by Demeter as she searched for Persephone, and by it was a temple to the two goddesses. To get there, you have to clamber through a junkyard. Strange, isn't it, searching for traces of their civilization through the debris of our own. Still, all these ritual baths and B-days should give some future archaeologists quite a field day. The sacred tree itself is long gone, but the site is still holy. It's a Greek Orthodox church now, St. Savas, built from bits of the old temple. It's time for the morning service. People still come here for cures, as they did in ancient times, especially women with breast cancer. The priest, Father Vasileios, trained in the Greek community in Toronto. He came back to his native land, to this small congregation in the suburbs, in the belief that the ancient rituals of the Orthodox Church should be revived in all their richness, even in these secular times. In traditional Greece, they've always understood the meaning of Demeter's gift. Bread has never lost its sacramental quality. During the Turkish occupation, the church was a great preserver of Greekness, when religion and even language itself were driven underground. The modern Greek poet Cavafy said, "When I enter a church of the Greeks, with its fragrant incense, its voices, the stately presence of the priests, the solemn rhythm of their movements, their resplendent robes, my mind goes to the high honors of our race, to the glory of our tradition.
Χριστός Ανέστη. Χριστός Ανέστη. Χριστός Ανέστη.
The next landmark on the road is the Kephissos River, flowing down from the mountains of Attica to the sea. The Irish poet W.B. Yeats wrote, "When you have found the Kephissos, you have found the loveliest place there is." Just beyond the river, Pausanias says you come to a shrine to Zeus the Saviour. He's still here. He's St. George the Saviour now. It's a popular church among the old and sick, and on festival days you'll see crowds of people bringing live animals as offerings for the saint. As in ancient times, the living feed the dead. But nowhere in Greece is the continuity of ancient belief and practice seen so surely as in the rites for the dead, even in the modern city. And in these rites, women still fulfill many of their traditional roles. At home, before the funeral, the women prepare koliva, soul food. It's made of all the seeds, wheat, barley, nuts, raisins, and the blood-red seed of the pomegranate, the seed which Persephone ate, binding her to the world of the dead, when she could only return for part of each year to bring spring and new life back to the earth.
Των δικαίων τελειωμένων. Και η ψυχή του δούλου σου σώτρα να βάσουν φυλάτων αυτήν εις την ακαδία ζωή, την παρασύγκριν άνθρωπε, στην καταπαυτή σου Κύριε, που πάντες οι Αγίοι σου αναπαύονται.
Ισόπο και καθαριστήσαμε, πληνίζουμε και υπερχιών αλευκανθήσαμε.
The service for the dead was taken over by men when Christianity triumphed. But in parts of rural Greece and Crete, still today women do it as they did in ancient times, pouring the libation of wine, singing the lament, and speaking the dark and unforgettable words, "The earth which fed you now will eat you." When the grave is filled, the family will leave gifts, an old man's favorite coffee cup, a child's toy. And then, As their ancestors have done for thousands of years, they eat the colivar over the grave, eat the seeds of life. We've reached the halfway point, Thivon Crossroads, where the sacred way meets the road to Thebes. It was lined with marble monuments in Pausanias' day. Now other gods are enshrined. This is the point when, walking in the midday sun, you feel like catching a bus back to Athens, having a shower and a cold beer, and giving up the whole enterprise. And to add insult to injury, the fast food shop doesn't even sell Greek coffee. The dancer Isadora Duncan skipped past here barefoot one summer day in the 1920s, drunk on wine given her by the priest of St. Savas. Then the Thivon Crossroads was farm fields and orange groves. But as everywhere now, needs must move with the times. Things are as they are, said the poet Aeschylus, and will end as they must. From Thivon, you climb out of the plain of Athens up Mount Igallio. Henry Miller scrambled up here 50 years ago. The light, he said, is intoxicating. You feel as if you could bound up the mountain in a few giant strides. On one side, the stones stand out with microscopic clarity. On the other are trees such as one sees in Japanese prints, trees flooded with light, intoxicated coryphantic trees which must have been planted by the gods in a moment of drunken exultation. From the top, the whole of Athens stretches out before you. This was a famous view described by many early travelers. In 1801, Edward Clarke wrote, "There is no spot whence Athens may be seen to compare with this. All that nature and art can possibly exhibit by every marvelous combination of vast and splendid objects and of surprising effects of color, light and shade." The sacred way crosses Mount Igallio through a pass which is still wooded, and here perhaps you can feel something of what the initiates felt, walking through glades of pine and cypress. For the ancients, nature and the landscape were sacred. There were oracles which interpreted the whispering of leaves in the wind. The forests were alive with spirits. In the middle of the pass is the old Byzantine church of Daphne. The name means in Greek laurel trees, laurels being the ancient emblem of the god Apollo. The present church is built on the ruins of temples, to Apollo and to Demeter and Persephone, They were demolished by the Christians, but you can see fragments of ancient marble in the walls. Inside, on the dome, is a haunting image of Christ as Pantocrator, the all-powerful. No gentle Jesus meek and mild this, but a stern judge, a patriarchal lawmaker. Where then the rights of Mother Earth? I first came down this road in the 60s when the highway was new. I can still remember the breeze heavy with the smell of pine resin and a furnace heat. The trees are bent and thin now, with crusted branches. The sacred way is still here though, a little wooded path near the road. You could hardly have a more pointed parallel between their world and ours. That's ours, dashing by at 70 miles an hour. And this is their world. At the end of the pass was a temple to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. It stood below a rock face covered with niches where the initiates left offerings. Round about were found lots of tiny doves in stone or bronze, left by women devotees asking blessings of the goddess, whose grace was seen as a force of nature. The road now descends to the sea, where the island of Salamis floats on the haze. On this side of the causeway is the sacred lake, which used to belong to the priests of Elefsis. The army has the fishing rights now. Here the pilgrims bathed on their balmy late September afternoon. Across the bay, under the horned mountain, they now could see the goal of their journey, Elefsis. There's 4 more miles to go. The ancient pilgrims were now on the threshold of their beatific vision, buoyed up with expectation. But the modern traveller now enters a wasteland. For the plain which brought forth Demeter's fruits each harvest time has been swamped by industry since the 60s. The pollution hangs in the air, often blotting out the hills around. As you walk, your eyes burn and your head aches. When Edward Clark rode along here in 1801, it was, he says, a scene of indescribable beauty, carpeted with anemones, pink, white, and blue. This is all that's left of the last of the great tombs which once lined the road all the way from Athens. It commemorated Strato and his wife Polla and their family, who were initiated in Roman times. The Greeks believed that it was here in the plain of Elefsis that Demeter first taught humanity the secret of agriculture. Today, there's only one tiny farm still working on the road. Maria Mavraki soldiers on, hemmed in by factories and machinery, in patient solidarity with her animals. Maria's got 60 sheep and 20 cows, which give milk for one of the big yogurt firms. She says that since the factories spread along the road in the 70s, the developers have tried to get her out by fair means or foul. Maria wants to continue farming, and she won't give up.
Και τώρα έχετε προβλήματα με το νερό.
But in the last 2 years, Maria says, a new threat has appeared to her livelihood and to the fertility of her soil. There's been no rain, and so there's no fodder for the cattle. In the meantime, she works on, from 4 in the morning till 9 at night. It's hard, unremitting work with no days off. As she says, the sheep don't know it's Sunday. Look at my hands, Maria says. That's a lifetime's work, that is. And I've got a pension of $70 a month to look forward to when I'm finished. So the future for Maria and for her land is clouded. If the rain doesn't come this year, she'll have to get rid of her cattle. She may even be forced to sell off the front field. And the petrol companies are waiting. It's almost as if the curse on Edward Clark has come true. Dusk is coming on now. The long-distance trucks are heading for Corinth. Easter traffic jamming the roads. Everyone's going back home. All Greeks want to be with their family for Easter. It's the great festival of the year. On the outskirts of Elefsis, the early travellers mention an old well used by the villagers. It was called the Kalon Freya, the Good Well. And it's still here. It was used right up to the war. The parapet is built out of marble blocks from Demeter's temple. You can see the grooves made by the ropes by which generations of people drew their water. Close by the well is a stone bridge by which the Sacred Way crossed the river before Elefsis. It was built in the AD 120s by Hadrian, the Roman emperor famous for his wall across northern England. And Pausanias walked this way 30 years later. The light was fading when the pilgrims reached the bridge at the end of their long and momentous day. And then, as they crossed over, in a carnival atmosphere, they were met by the people of Elefsis, draped in sheets, who subjected them to mockery and outrageous abuse. This was good luck. Even emperors had to go through it, to leave their self-importance behind. Now this surely is an excellent custom, which might profitably be revived in our own time for several presidents and prime ministers one could think of. After all, as Plato said, the gods love a good joke. The pilgrims entered Elefsis in darkness, their way lit by thousands of torches. Today you walk the last few yards in their footsteps, in a neon glow from the wine bar where the girls of Elefsis dance the lambada. Next door is a little chapel where the great carving of Demeter and Persephone was found, which we saw in the National Museum back in Athens at the beginning of the journey. Ahead in the twilight, the Hill of Mysteries, the darkened mouth of Pluto's cave, and the remains of Demeter's sanctuary, the spiritual heart of the ancient Greek world. The uninitiated could go no further, but only glimpse from outside the fire which burst from the roof of the great hall in the middle of the night. Only the initiates were permitted to go on into the presence of the goddess. And today, the twin of Clark's statue alone remains. Back in the sanctuary in the cold light of day, there is, in truth, little left to tell us what took place here. And the initiates, of course, swore never to reveal what they saw. But what associations these broken landmarks must have had for the pilgrims. Here's the Kalikoron, the well of beautiful dances, where Demeter mourned the loss of Persephone and where the girls of Eleusis danced to cheer her up. All around, you see tantalizing clues to the mysteries. Ears of wheat, poppies, pomegranates, torches, the sacred drink. In the hillside above is the gateway to the underworld, the cave where legend said Persephone was restored to the light of day. At the inner gate, the old paving stones are deeply grooved by the doors through which the initiates passed. Clark's statue and its sister originally stood on either side here. You can follow the processional route on up to the site of the Great Hall itself. Here, on banks of seats cut into the rock, several thousand people watched the climax of the mysteries, plunged from darkness into light, from grief into joy. But what the final vision was, terrible and luminous, no one knows. There's one last clue, though. The Christians said that at one point an ear of wheat was reaped and displayed in silence by the priest, the Hierophant. And perhaps this finds an echo in the words of the Gospels. For are we not like ears of wheat? Except that we die, we cannot be reborn. Some sort of worship lasted on this site for 2,000 years. After its destruction by the Christians, it was covered by the poor village Clark visited, where the statue from the inner gate was revered 1,400 years on. And where as late as the 1930s, they danced by torchlight for the Earth Mother until the police put an end to it. So the mystery still remains. The secret was well kept. The journey's almost over. I've arranged to meet Nano Marinatos in the town square. Nano's a scholar and archaeologist in Athens, and she too is hooked on the mystery.
And basically, I think the Eleusinian mysteries have a very simple ideology that there is death, but there is also continuity, and the continuity comes through sustenance and through eating. And the visible allegory for this is the growth of vegetation. That's why Demeter, who is the mother, is the goddess of agriculture, and Persephone is the one who marries death. It's the link between life and death.
It was an insight the Christian church didn't or couldn't erase. Even here in Elefsis today, surrounded by industry, the women still choose the little chapel on the temple site for their special days. From the first fruits of the harvest, they bake a big offering loaf, the pelanos, just as they did for Demeter. The chapel is dedicated to the All-Holy Woman, that is, Mary, but here they call her Misosporitisa, the lady inside the seed, the old attribute of Demeter.
People have to face their own death.
People have to face their own death.
Yes. That's the mystery of Eleusis. How do you face your own death? By dealing not with death, but with life and regeneration and the beginning of life. And this is what a sheaf of wheat is, really. You cut it, and it's dead, but in it, it contains the germ of life and regeneration. This is the meaning of the seed, because from the seed comes new life.
Seed of life.
The seed of life, exactly. The essence of the Eleusinian mysteries is to link agriculture with life and death, coming to terms with your own death. And that's why the ancients said that if you took part in the Eleusinian mysteries, you became so much happier, so much more blessed.
One other thing about the mysteries that's always fascinated me, maybe you can answer, is that the central people in it are women, and the experiences of women. It's a mother and a daughter. It's the eternal mother and the eternal daughter. And yet men could participate in this. What does it tell you about the way women were conceived of?
Yes, that's an interesting
in a
question.
ritual like that.
Now, the central participants in the Eleusinian mysteries are Demeter and her daughter, women. Demeter embodies agriculture. Persephone is dead, or at least goes to the dead and comes back. And it's interesting that in modern Greece, it's women who are in charge of plant life, making the seeds and preparing the concubine funerals, gathering plants on the 1st of May. It's always women, and sometimes of unmarried status, girls just making the transition. They're in charge of gathering the flowers and the plants. So they're close to nature, but the women are also in charge of death. They prepare the corpse, they anoint it, they are the ones who tend the grave. So women are the essential links between nature and culture. They're closer to nature because they give birth, but they also take care of the dead.
Tonight's Good Friday, and when the procession goes around the streets, are we seeing something that has a kind of connection with that deep past, would you say?
Yes, because tonight we're celebrating death. At least we're accepting death. I shouldn't say necessarily celebrating, but we are facing death, we are accepting death through the death of Christ. The candles that people are holding during the procession on Good Friday are echoed by the torches held by some of the protagonists in the Eleusinian mysteries. The idea of the procession is very ancient. We know that the Eleusinian mysteries involved a procession, part of which took place at night. So I, for one thing, would have no trouble using the procession tonight as a model for what went on in the mysteries.
The Greeks call Easter Friday the Epitathion, the lamentation. The next night, Easter Saturday, is the Anastasis, the resurrection. At midnight, the church is plunged into darkness, and then light is brought and passed out of the church from person to person. There's joyful celebration, and afterwards the generations of the family eat a meal together, descendants and ancestors united in the old rituals. The secret of Elefsis may be lost, but perhaps after all, the spirit of Elefsis has survived. As the Greek poet Sikelianos said, "It is as if the dead have come alive again. As if they embraced me, so deep in the ground do our roots mingle, so high are our branches raised in the sky."
"14 miles, 2,500 years of history." I'm John Hemingway. See you next time on Travels.
Travels is made possible by a grant from Lexus. At Lexus, we believe those who seek the adventure of the open road should be relentless in their pursuit. Travels is also made possible by the financial support of viewers like you.
This episode of Travels is available on VHS video cassette for $19.95. Call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen. Please specify program title or subject matter.
This is PBS.